Good morning. I just wanted to. I had a private question about the first edition Big Country Time Sports first edition book that I was playing um, a couple of videos ago in the Johnny Unitas career game, and that was the original Big Country Time Sports book. That was the first edition of the book, and it was a 7 by 10 60, 80 pages or something. I think it was 60 something pages. Anyway, long story short, they asked if there was still any way to get that. And unfortunately, that original book is lost forever because the original files were ultimately, when I lesson learned, because it was my very first book, when I went in to make changes to fix the text and typos and some problems, I wrote over the original files. I just saved over it as, 1.3, and then I saved over as 1.5, whatever. So the point is, unfortunately, that first Big Country Football, very first edition book is super rare, with the giant quarterback on the cover with the football figures running around his feet, and on the back so the innards of that book are absolutely lost forever because I did the stupid thing when I made edits for the following revisions directly to the file, which means that that particular book is lost forever unless you happen to be one of the lucky few to buy it. But what I also realized as I did, though, I don't know if people knew this, so in Candlelight Games, I have the free booklet games. These are the little 5.8 by 8.6 booklet games of Boxing Time Classic, which is not, again, confusing, but it has nothing like the Boxing Time that's in the big book. Football Time Classic, which is a variation of the very first ideas I had of Football Time before it evolved into, what it has become. Cold Helmet Racing, of course, which is actually a 6x9 game, but the point is it's a booklet game. And then Racing Time Classic. So for those who want that version of Racing Time that uses the number system as opposed to letter grades, there is this version here. And remember, there's also, I put up an easy cheat sheet rules for this too, which are out here. Racing Time Easy Rules, which is basically that version of Racing Time using the numbers for everything instead of letter grades, which is just faster, much more intuitive. I put the easy cheat sheet rules here, exactly the same game. Okay, but that isn't what this is about. It was a question about is there a way they can still buy that first edition book? What if I could, activate it on Lulu and retrieve it from retirement and sell it? And I said I would gladly do that for them, except I wrote over those original files when I was correcting things. And so that first book, with all of its warts and typos or whatever, but those exact versions of the book are gone forever. But I wanted to also let everybody know, those who may not know, there's a lot of stuff here. When somebody had asked me to put up the PDF of my fast action cards that I use in the game, and I had typed up a PDF so people could print them and cut them out, a couple years ago. And so I went back and I made sure they were in the football game stuff. But I also, when I put those facts up for people to print, I also put up the Time Sports 5 edition of the book, free version. So this little version of the original Time Sports book is kind of here and has been here since June 12th, floating around. Again, because the original files were lost, this version has at least the original inside cover of the football player. It is the original introduction and the original horrible. So I used this. This was my write-up for Big Country Boxing. So everything was in caps, and again, the punctuation isn't great. The grammar was not great. There was just a lot of things here. I didn't have an editor, and I didn't have the time to go back and work on all this when I was working on games. So a lot of this stuff is, dated. But anyway, and there's the art. So anyway, it does have a version of that. And how do we know how old this is? Because I had a typo here in small town. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 2 3s. So there are these kind of typos that were in the original books that just because I didn't have a second person or an editor to help, a lot of this stuff slipped through the cracks on me. And again, no big deal, but all of this stuff had been fixed. And as I was fixing stuff, I was writing over the files. So the original files have been ultimately lost outside of my hard copies. And I do have, it's like the original Racing Time game in its own file, because I was going to make the Racing Time comic book version, which would be a standalone, just Big Country Racing Time in a comic book. So I have all of the original files, but not this original big book. Anyway, long story short, that's in here, for instance, right? With again, the dam, and of course it has the American and Canadian charts. And it has the full original Big Country, with named owners and GMs, and the schedule for the 48th season, the original 10-team league or whatever. Anyway, that's not the point, though. The point I was going to make, it has the original basketball time. It has the original baseball time and racing time, 3rd edition. So again, why this isn't the book I'm using on the table in that video is because this 3rd edition was the introduction of the grade system. So again, like Boxing Time originally didn't use a grade system. It wasn't the time engine, I call it. And so Boxing Time Classic was shelved in favor of a brand new version of boxing using the grade system, which is my favorite version of my boxing games. But the point is, because I wanted all of my sports games to use the same engine in a big book. So Racing Time originally was in the time game, but it wasn't. I wanted all the Big Country games in the Big Country book to use the grade engine. So this was the kind of the 3rd edition of Racing Time, was when I introduced grades instead of math, instead of numbers. And so so the charts do all the work for you, and all you have to do is track points. This is in many ways, this is much easier to track, keep your teams and everything, because it's quick to look and say, oh man, he's an A. This is an A track. It's a hard track. Oh, it's an F track. It's a fast track. It's an easy track, or whatever. It's easy to glance and just know immediately whether a team is a good pick or bad, as opposed to a number score, which obviously a negative number is bad, and whatever. But anyway, long story short, and you match up the driver in the car, that gives you a grade, and that grade against the track tells you how well that car is going to do today. So it takes into account all of the pieces of your team, and then applies them to the difficulty of the track, and that's how well that particular team is going to hopefully roll this track today. Okay, long story short, this version has been up here available free for, since June 12th. I think it was June 12th. It might have been June 12th this year. I can't remember when I had unearthed it to go up with the FACs. And then there's Basketball Time. This is the original Basketball Time with the 6-man rules. And then, of course, with the Basketball Association. And then Hockey Time. These are again, this version of Hockey Time used letter grades with a goalie rating. And it used units, so you had to roll for the units, and this might have had a timing dice. I can't remember if this has a timing die. Yeah, the 3rd die is your time die. It tells you how much time's gone off the clock, and you roll to see which unit is in control of the puck. So this version is even more, I think. Gosh, because Hockey Time went through 3 or 4 revisions before I landed on the Hockey Time that's in the Time Sports book, which you can buy, and that's I've said before, the Time Sports book that's up for sale. And I know all this again. I know this stuff continues to be confusing to people, but it is what it is. Time Sports. All right. So this version of Time Sports, this was So originally I released Time Sports, 5 sports games, 1 book, and that was the first thing. And it had the Big Country write-up in it, but they weren't called the Big Country Time Sports games because they weren't the advanced versions of the Time engine. So Big Country became the advanced version of the games, but Time Sports games evolved and were tightened up and cleaned up and became the, as I've said before, again, confusing to people, my favorite version of the Time Sports games. This book here has absolutely my favorite version of the faster, smaller, simpler games. So in a way, this was a collection of the designer's choice versions of the Time Sports games. This book, 6x9 paperback. I talked before about my Desert Island 5, and I purposely don't choose any of my own games for that. I try to, I try to make my Desert Island games something I'm not responsible for. But truth be told, if I had to pack up and scatter out of this house because it's going to burn to the ground, I'm snatching Time Sports. So, if I were to, which game am I going to be carrying around that's mine, that features my sports games? It will be this book, straight up, without a doubt. It'll be this one, right? Okay. So the Big Country Time Sports, that all those is the Big Country Universe write-up is in those books. So you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Porter Bay, my Porter Bay, right? Okay, that's the big coil-bound old version, but the new 2026 edition, for instance, if they say Big Country, it includes the Big Country Universe write-up and the advanced versions of the Time Sports games. So Big Country just means advanced Time Sports. And Time Sports means the original ideas, the simple versions of the games. And hockey's undergone probably, I would say there's been 4 iterations of Hockey Time to get it narrowed to what I wanted in my book, my favorite book, right? So anyway, you can see there's lots of choices. For instance, if you just want Big Country Racing Time Classic, you can buy just this little booklet. If you don't want, this is the Big Country version of the game. So it's the advanced version of Country Time, Racing Time, excuse me. But Time Sports. So again, this has 8 sports in it, or 7 sports. I can't remember. I don't know if Rally's in this. I don't think Rally is in this. No. So this has 7 sports in it. So eventually Time Sports, what happened with Time Sports is then I put out the final version of Time Sports 5 with a bonus game, boxing. And that would be the first book in which I had finished boxing. So for those who want to know what the very first version of Boxing Time with the graded game engine, if you have that Time Sports 5 with a bonus game, the 6th game, which was boxing, those files would be pretty rare, right? And then Boxing Time didn't change much to become Big Country. It was just put into the Big Country book and universe, but the engine didn't change a whole lot, right? There were some rule fixes and and again typos and things that needed to be handled, but to answer another question, I had another commenter ask, can they still buy this 2026 special edition? Of course, this is the only 2026 edition available for sale. There is no other version. So the one I'm playing on the table yesterday in my tutorials, and when I walk through all the tutorials over the next few days, I'm going to be doing tutorial hockey and all that. They're going to be out of this book because this is the very latest Big Country Time Sports edition. And I did that to get the book bigger for visual, so it's easier to read. I made the layout easier to read, and I rearranged some of the tables so they're in better order and fixed punctuation and blah, blah, blah. I've talked about this ad infinitum, but the biggest reason I wanted to take out the 4 full simulators that aren't part of the original concept of this books, of the Time Sports books and the Big Country Time Sports books, they weren't going to have full sims. the definitive edition comic books were going to have full sims. So you could get Football Time definitive edition, and that would have the latest version of Football Time with the D66 full football engine. So that's how that was going to go about. There was never going to be a full racing sim for Big Country Racing Time, but I was going to put out its own little comic so people wouldn't have to buy the big book. They could just buy the game, the sports game they're interested in, hockey, basketball. And I had finished those. I had all the comics available. So you could get just Big Country Hockey Time, and you could buy just basketball, and then you wouldn't have to pay for the $30 or whatever it was, $24.99 big coil-bound book, because that's the most expensive. And I thought there'll be a lot of people who just don't care about rally. They don't care about my racing game. They just want hockey. So I made a comic book size Hockey Time, Big Country Hockey Time. And those just weren't selling, so I just removed them. I thought, well, okay, I guess people rather just pay a little more and have everything in one book, but it doesn't matter. I removed them because I just think they were, again, further confusing people, So, and I've done this before. I've pulled some books down because it confuses people. But at this point, it's like every time I break out a book to play, somebody will ask me, can I still buy that version? And so a lot of the versions stay up because there are people who are going to want to buy or have that version. But to let, again, that individual know, if you have Big Country Time Sports 5th edition or the big book, you do not need this at all in any way. If you have Big Country Time Sports big book, 5th edition big book, the coil bound 220-page tome with all 12 sports games, you absolutely do not need anything else. Not only do you have a rare edition of the very good version of all the games. The games didn't change, just some typos changed and things. And there were a couple of rules that I highlighted. But that edition also has the 4 full sims: D66 soccer, D66 football, D100 baseball, and D66 basketball are also in that big book. So, and you can't buy the big book 5th edition anymore. It is, I've pulled it. So if you have that or the 5th edition book, you do not need this edition unless you just want to have the larger format. Because again, all I did was I realized that price was chiefly based on page count, not on paper. Although if you use premium coated paper, it is more expensive, etc., or coil. But coil bound and page count drive the price up the most. I mean, hardback, of course. Hardback books drive the price way up. But so if I can get the page count down and I can avoid using coil, I can save people as much money as possible, if that makes sense. So, all right. So without further ado, the gist of this video, get back to my point. The original 1st edition Time Sports game that I'm playing in that video, wherever that video is. Let's find that video. Let's see if I have where's my video? I don't know. Here it is. Time Sports Football Time United's Career. This book right here. There were multiple versions of this that use this cover, but this very first edition is no longer available even in my archives, in my files, except in paperback. So out there in the world, the people who bought that very first version, they're going to have this very rare copy, and I have one. Unfortunately, I've written in mine. I've jotted rule changes in mine as it was my working copy, so I knew there were things I was going to change, and I knew there were things I wanted. So I've actually jotted ideas and rules in this. So this will, when I die, maybe this might be worth something to some collector because it will have notes from the author, so to speak, written in it. But a version of it is free here, folks. I just wanted to remind everybody that does not know it that there is again another free version of a time game. So Dell's got some stuff here. His silver screen game is freaking amazing. I still don't own this in paperback, and when I get it, I'll play it more, but I don't own it yet. But Dell's Big Country silver screen is freaking amazing. Dell's Rally Sprint game, his kind of and then his update, his rally game. His is a lot more it gives more control to the player. My rally games are automated solitary. You don't have any choices. Dell's games tend to give you some choices, so you feel like you're driving the car. So Dell's rally racing game is more hands-on for the player to drive the rally car or to manage the race. Dell's Flash Boxing Express, and then Gridiron Dice drives core free. So this is, if you want to try Gridiron or what Gridiron is going to kind of be, it would be this. There's a core free, there's the core revised 1.5, and then there's the printable charts. However, know this, that the Gridiron book is heavily modified. So this just gives you a kind of an idea of what Gridiron is, but it's not the final version. I mean, this was done months before Dell even had got close to. I mean, Dell's book climbed as much as 100 pages, by the way, before he called it down to 61. So Dell's book really went through some trials and tribulations. All right. And then I had my football free stuff. So people are always asking about the fields I use. So I have a 100 field. You can print it out on paper and put a dime and a penny and track your field. I had 110 field for Canadian football, which will be obsolete in a year or so because Canadians are cutting out the extra 10 yards. And then I had my quick field, which is just a slightly different range. So again, you put your penny here and your dime here, and move the penny as you move the football up to the dime. And you can put a nickel here to mark your downs, and you can put your index cards for your football time teams right here for easy reference. Okay, so I had those. It looks like I had people who ask about the stuff I use on the table and my fast stat generators. So many of these stat gens ended up in books, customized for the book. So the ideas of my quick stat generation concepts were heavily modified for a particular book, right? This one was invented, for those who can read that, StatGen PPFB. And guess what this was invented for? This might be the very first version ever. It was made for pen and paper football. So I wanted to generate statistics, box score statistics for my fast play pen and paper games. So this is probably the debut concepts typed up after I play tested and refined them. So you'll recognize these charts, and you might ask, why do they have 1 through 6? Because in my pen and paper career game, when I would roll up the running backs, every die was an individual back. So if I rolled up a 6-3-3, that would be a total of 12. But the 6, that running back, whatever his name was, Jones, is a 6. His backup, Williams, is a 3. And the third back is also a 3. So at the end of the game, when I would simulate the pen and paper football game quickly, I want to know what the top back ran for. I would make that die roll. He's the number 1 back. I roll 1d20. Let's say I roll a 6. So he's a 6 rated back. On the roster, he had 15 carries in this game for 64 yards. The other back, he's a second back. He rolls 2d12. Let's say I roll a 7. He had 12 carries for 51 yards. And the third back is 1-3. Let's say I roll a 1. That would be the quarterback. And the quarterback, the quarterback would be rated based on his quarterback role. So let's say the quarterback's also, I have a team that has a 5-2-1. So they have a poor quarterback score, but I have a quarterback who's a 5, and he runs, let's say I roll a 1, he carries for 7 for 19. So total, that team ran for 27, 34 carries for 120 something yards, right? That's how that would work. So the number was literally the value of the receiver. So when I rolled up the receivers to create them, if I rolled a 4-2-2, well, the top receiver was a 4-rated receiver. The other 2 were 2-rated receivers, and they would use these columns at the end of the game. So you can see where the ideas came from. If you want to know the history of how Jason designed and how games that inspired me, I talk about pen and paper football being my desert island football game. Well, I said before, I have never played a game I didn't like, but I have never tweaked. I have never not house brewed or hot rodded or tweaked a game that I didn't love, and I loved pen and paper, so I would come up with these things to increase the enjoyment of my pen and paper experience. Right? I did this with Grid Zone. I made a fast action deck for Grid Zone football, and I devised a fast play for Grid Zone football, so you can simulate games quickly between two teams and not have to play out every game. And it would generate a score based on Grid Zone's dice, right? So that's long gone. I don't know. There are people out there in the world. He used to put that up on his website, did Gary, but I think he may have removed all that extraneous stuff. I don't know. All right. And then you can see how that evolved into my quick play stat generator. So this was designed for pen and paper football because it used the player rating when you rolled up the squad. So when I rolled up the running backs, all three would have a rating. Okay, well, you can see that wasn't going to work for all my quick play games, so I made the quick play stat generation. However, this is for Big Country Football. So this was for my game, and it used box score totals. So if a running back had a run for a touchdown, that was worth 3 points, and you would track those box score points, and at the end of the game, you'd have fumbles and punts, and they would all add up, and at the end of the game, your running team, you might end up at the end of the game with only +2 box score values, and you would make a roll to find out how well your team ran the ball. This is for Big Country Football. You could use it with any football game because if you have drives, if the game uses drives, you can do points, and the points will tell you what the stats retain to. So a team that really kicks ass running the ball on a box score has, let's say, 3 rushing touchdowns and a couple of first downs, and they're +12. You're going to roll this chart, and that's how well they ran the ball as a team, right? Okay. So you can use this with any football game that's tracking possessions. It has to track possessions. Okay, but it was made for my Big Country Football version 2, which was my 2D20 full football sim, right? Okay. And this was for the reason I did this, because if you're playing the full sim, you can just write down the stats. But I had a quick play version. So again, you'd play out your games in the full sim, and you would fast play all the other teams in the week. And that quick play would need stats. Okay, and then of course I have my fast football game stat gen. Right? This is completely different. This is about reverse engineering statistics. So this is a way, these are formulas, statistical formulas to help you reverse engineer or to score your players based on production. So wins and losses. And then last but not least, I did a season stats. So at the end of the year, you just roll up in the league to generate the quarterback's passing stats based on wins. So let's say I finished my Big Country 1952. So I use this for my Big Country seasons. So guys are always asking, how are you getting the stats for your Big Country Football Time League? Well, at the end of the year, depending on how many wins a team has, I then roll a D20 for that team, and it'll tell me that quarterback, let's say the quarterback won 7 games. I roll this die, I roll a 12. He had 1,541 yards as a starting quarterback, right? So in his 7 wins, he had 1,500 yards, but then I roll 3 die. I don't have to roll his TDs and interceptions because I should have those in my box scores. So this is here for games in which you simulate fast sim. So let's say I only play my team, but I fast sim everybody else, which means I don't know if they threw touchdowns or ran for touchdowns or whatever. Then you would use a 3 die 6, and it would tell you the fast simmed quarterback's production. So he was 7. He had 7 victories, threw for only 1,541, but he had, let's say I roll 9. He had 14 touchdowns in those 7 games and 12 interceptions. However, you do not want to use this if you're actually playing out the possessions, because you'll know how many touchdowns this guy threw, and you'll know how many interceptions this guy threw. So you won't need this. This is for when I fast simmed teams. And I did it again for rushing leaders. Okay, that team won 7, so their top back rolls the dice. Their top back gets 948 yards rushing that year. I know how many touchdowns and fumbles he had because I keep them in the box scores, right? So that's how that works. And then, of course, and it's varied because there are teams that win 14 games and their top back doesn't have, he isn't the bell cow. I mean, again, you can have a team that dominates and even has 2,000 yards rushing as a team, but their top back may only get 600 of that. So these are dynamically variant and random to keep it really interesting for, and then again, the touchdowns only if you fast sim those teams, right? And then, of course, the wide receivers. And you would do this, of course, for every receiver. So you're going to have your 7 to 9 wins, but you're going to roll up for your top 3 receivers, your 2 wide receivers and your tight end, basically. And then what I would do for running backs generally is I would just roll the 0 range for running backs or something. So, actually, no, I think I rolled up for every, I might have rolled it up for every, the top 3 and the 2 backs. So I think I literally rolled up all 5. That would give me my completions. And then again, I would at least know the completions and the yardage kind of thing. So, it can get skewed though if you're not careful. What am I saying? No, I only rolled up the leader. So whatever I rolled here would be the leading receiver on the team. So I knew who the top receivers were for every team, and then that would tell me who the top receiver was for the season. And then, of course, they were given awards either based on this or they were given awards based on their touchdowns. Because obviously, if I'm tracking real touchdowns and a receiver has 15 touchdowns but only catches 39 balls, he's going to probably still get the award because he had 15 touchdowns and 39 catches, right? Okay, so that just gives you an idea of the evolution of how these things evolved. But they're all free, so you can use them. Anyway, and with that said, I had people who were interested in my fast action detail deck for pen and paper football for Big Country. And so a couple of years ago, I typed it up and put it in format. You could print it and cut it out and have a details deck. And I even put large blinds so you could print this and easily cut along with scissors and make a fast action deck. It would give you your turnover. Why did a team fail to score? If they scored a touchdown, who's responsible and how far, and if they kick a field goal or they miss a field goal. You can flip this to see if they made a field goal or flip it to see if they missed a field goal or something, right? Okay, and so that's there. But at the same time, I went ahead and threw up the old Time Sports. I don't know which version this was, but it was labeled free for this. And then, of course, in this folder is the conversion charts for that I just put up a couple days ago when somebody asked, what's the best way to convert my football time grades into pen and paper football offense and defense? And so I gave you a conversion chart so you can turn your Canadian football time teams into pen and paper football or vice versa. Okay. So I have a lot of those things because I've been playing these games for a long time. And then everything else, for the most part, free booklet games. These are my games in booklet size that were standalone. They used to be for sale. Some of them are still for sale if you want to own that cover art and you want to own a really nice booklet. And then, of course, the historical tomes. So Rodney made the entire history of Big Country, games, and he made Parallax Football, all the entire history of professional football for my Parallax Football game, which is my big flagship football sim. And then, of course, the historical ratings for baseball, basketball, hockey, etc. All of these are completely usable with any version of the time games. All you need is that offense and that defensive rating, and you can play this version. You can play these historical baseball games with any version of baseball time. Okay, and then of course, because he made that, I made a free version of all the original time games, so people could enjoy these tomes without paying a penny. Right? They could just print this out and have baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, and they could use the entire history of those sports with these versions that are that were completely remastered from the original games. And for instance, baseball needed it because my baseball time versions and all my books that were available no longer had the DPDF feature, and so his grades do. So I remastered to make sure DP and DF were in the rules, right? So they match Rodney's baseball time historical teams. Okay, because the original baseball time did have DPDF and O offensive. I can't remember. It had three. It had three. The very first version had offensive OBs, batters, pitchers, and fielders. And then it just became offense and defense, and DP and DF for defensive pitching, defensive fielding. Right. So basketball time. And again, these are the reason this needed to be remastered was I removed the complexity of the rosters with a sixth man, and I wanted this to have scores that resembled more NBA scoring in history. So the scoring had to be revamped so you could have more NBA level scoring. Then my time games were based on simulating a sport of basketball, but I didn't care whether they jived with the NBA or not. So this scoring chart needed to be remastered for the NBA, basically. Okay, and then my sixth man is dealt with a minus and a plus here. Okay, and then football time, because he had the entire history of pro football and the entire history of Canadian football, I decided I would put them all together in one chart, and you just simply roll the dice, and you're going to get a touchdown, or you're going to get a rouge. It's a punt, but it's a rouge, right? It's a field goal attempt, but it's a rouge. So if you roll this in the pro game, American game, you're going to get 3 points. If you roll this in the Canadian game, he misses the field goal, and you get a rouge. So you take the in parentheses for the Canadian game as a rouge, right? So here's an example of a Canadian team getting screwed out of 2 points in this simulation. So I would argue my remastered free versions of the original 4 Time Sports games probably are the single best versions. Certainly, if you want to use Rodney's historical ratings. Remember, my games were invented for you to create fictional teams, fictional leagues, and play those sports, and the scores and things would be unique to your universe. Having actual replay in the history of sports to replay, it was something that I felt was so special, a gift for the community, that it deserved a remaster of the original time concepts. Again, matching not only what was in his tomes, but also matching the output, the production a little better for, say, basketball and football, both offensive. So this little printout of 4 sheets of paper, that's why it's in here, because I expected people to print what they wanted to play. I'm going to print just pages 22 through 24 and play that entire era of baseball. And at the same time, they can print this baseball timeout, and they're ready to go. That's all they need. Okay, and then football time complete. Again, this is the football time version that has the D66 full simulator, free. What else? Okay, and then we got the racing time. Oh, and by the way, Rodney did Big Country, the advanced games. So then Rodney put out the baseball, basketball, hockey advanced. He did not need to do football because football's advanced. Nothing changes as far as, so even Big Country is a more advanced book of games, but football time has never changed between the 2 books, aside from having more details like a touchdown chart or a turnover chart or an event chart, right? But so he didn't need to change. He didn't need to make a Big Country football time ratings, because football time is the same for both games. But basketball time, you have individual players. So he then made the Big Country basketball teams with all the players, and they all are graded because you have to have man-to-man matchups, and they score independently. So this is the advanced version of basketball time. And so he did the entire history of pro basketball, baseball, and hockey, because my Big Country baseball, basketball, hockey feature individual players. So it was just incredibly, incredibly generous of him. And then his hockey teams that he made are also in here. And then, of course, the Big Country Time Sports free version, so those who want those advanced versions. And then Dell's naming generator for Big Country. This would be for an era of the late 40s of namings for men and women. If you don't want to, it's limited, but it's something. So if you don't want to try to dream up names all the time or use a phone book. When we were, years ago, when we had leagues in my house, we would grab the phone book and we would literally flip in the phone book, and that's how we got names. So we'd flip open and bam, drop our finger, and Bill Russell. Okay, so this guy's quarterback's Bill Russell, right? So that's how we got our names. We just used a phone book. And for all you youngsters out there, yeah, there was this thing called a phone book that every household had, and you could pick it up, flip it open, and you could look up people and say, oh, look, there's Bill. I want to talk to Bill. That I know Bill from church, but I don't know where Bill's at, and I don't know his phone number, so I look at, well, there's Bill. Oh, yeah, that must be Bill, and there's his address, and I'll call him and see if Bill wants to go fishing. Right? That's how you get a contact with somebody you knew, but you didn't, or you were looking them up or whatever. And if you were a salesman, a phone book was your best friend. You would cold call people. And I did that as an insurance and broker. I did some stock and insurance work briefly, very briefly, but I would cold call all day long, and a phone book was my best friend. And you had a yellow page. You could flip into Domino's Pizza and call your pizza place, and yeah, for all you young people who have no clue what a phone book was, yellow pages. Yeah, let your fingers do the walking, right? For those of you old guys like me, you'll remember that. All right, and then we have the engagement engine, Bloodsport, a free version of Bloodsport Gladiators, 1-0, soccer, and roller derby by Chris, which is amazing. And then just the simple edge system, and so how you can use it to make your own games, sports games. And then Christopher, of course, with Alpine, all the versions of his Big Country. So originally he made roller derby time. And my first season on the channel that I completed, I used his actual first game. I'm now using Big Country roller derby for my third year. And his brand new version of the Time Engine Remastered just came out, but I'm just now playing the Big Country teams that he made here. And then he made Alpine Skiing this year too, which I have yet to dive into really. I'm not a huge skiing guy. But this is the kind of thing you dive into around Christmas, right? Christmas time, winter time, for us folks that live in the snow. All right, I'm going to shut up now. I've gone 42 minutes talking about all this stuff, but I thought I would share just a reminder of what is out there. And it dawn on me when that person asked, can I get that? I was like, wait a minute, I have a free version. But before I answered his email, I thought I better go look at that, because I don't think it's the same. I don't think I have the same innards for the free version. And sure enough, this is the graded racing game. So it's not the numbers racing game. And the numbers racing game can be purchased, or you can get it in the Racing Time Easy Rules free. The numbers version of the game, with obviously some changes, rule changes, right? But the simple version of how you race by just adding the numbers to the dice is right here. And it's so fun. God, dog, is it fun. You think it's silly. It's just a scoring generator. But gee, many Christmas does it. The minute those dice hit the table, you can see it in your mind's eye how fast this guy's been hitting his laps, whether he's on the edge. And then when his car starts smoking or his tire blows, he's got to go into the pits. And there's a pit crew get the car back on the track. And, so much fun. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.